each week for the Hangouts in your schedule, or if it's better to mix up the times a little bit. So we'll see.
Well, and the one thing I would say though is because we keep getting these group emails with responses, like I actually had to go search for like your name to find out like, oh my gosh, I don't know when the times are. So it's not very clear like if it's Sunday nights at whenever you send it or Monday morning. Like I had to search out like throughout, to go log back in to figure out when this week was happening,
Okay, so do you know how to log on? Do you know how to log on to the Google Group webpage?
Maybe not. Maybe, right. Maybe.
That's the best way to do it. Let me show you. You know what? I can show you what to do. But if you, at the end of every email that you get, at the bottom of every single email, there's a spot that says, to see this question on the Google group or to see this question on the web page, click on this link, and it will bring you right to the group web page. When you're on that page, that's the welcome page to the group. There's a little section at the bottom that says announcements, and there's another one that says discussion questions. I really assume that email is going to be the way that you guys communicate with this course. I'd rather you go bookmark the web page, and then it's all right there in front of you. So that way, all you have to do is click back at announcements for week 3. You just click on them. It says announcements week 3, and then you have it right there. So that's the best way to do it. I'll send out the link again, but if you look at any one of the emails that came through, the very bottom says to see this discussion on the web, and it'll bring you right to that homepage. So ideally, that's how I want you to do it. I don't want you to be, scrolling through emails, because that is a pain to do that. And I still can't figure out why you guys are getting so many emails, because I double checked and all of you are supposed to be getting 1 a day. So I'm very confused as to why you guys are getting more than that. Are all of you getting more than 1 email a day? All right. So I mean, the only other, I don't know what, Google and YouTube are having issues here. They're trying to collaborate, and they're causing glitches left and right that we've never had before. So I might have to change around my format for the next course. But the only other option I can do is turn off all email. It would force you to have to go onto the website, which I was considering doing, just to get you guys to force you to go onto the web page rather than doing everything through your email. But I know people, email's right there, and it's quick and easy. But if you can bookmark the page on your computer or on your phone or in Safari or Google Chrome, then it just pops right up, and you've got all the information you need right there. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. All right, so I'm gonna jump in today with filling the emotional tank. We're gonna do about a half hour of me just modeling how I do this principle and talking a little bit about how I've seen it done other ways. And then the last half of the call, or however long it takes, I'm gonna let you guys share some of your ideas, or if you have stories that you think would work for this that you'd like to pitch, or just some maybe things you've seen done that you think would be a great way to illustrate this principle, that would be great. So if you guys don't mind, I'd love you to introduce yourself, and I just wanna hear one takeaway that you took from either this week's discussion questions or from the Google Hangout last week, where we started doing kind of the intro to the workshop. What's one takeaway that you'd like to share? Something that made an impression on you, or that you learned, or you were surprised about? Leave it open in general. Let's say your name first, so we know who you are.
I'm Adina Petersmeyer, and I'm from Vail, Colorado. And I think the thing I took away last week was, while we need to know the content through and through, that it is so much more about the magic and the management and the connection.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It is Adina's computer. It's echoing.
It is.
Sorry about that. All right, Dave?
Yeah, what I liked was actually, we talked about, physically getting people involved, whether it was making a move around or partnering up, shoulder buddies, things like that, to really get it to stick. Mm-hmm. Because I've been through, just on the work side, so many workshops that evaporate 20 minutes later. Yeah. So I thought that was really important as far as the presenter.
Yeah. And I thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things too is keeping that type of activity and energy level sprinkled throughout the whole workshop. There's a lot of trainers who do that for the first 20 minutes, and then the audience sits for the next hour. My rule of thumb is always there's an introduction, and there are 3 principles. So every single I call that 4 sections, and then there's a closing if you want to call it that. But every section of the workshop, you should have in your pocket a story and an activity, like an engaging activity. And then mostly every principal has a video. So after every video, there could be a discussion as well. So if you kind of keep that as a rule of thumb, now you might not use every single one every time, but at least you have that. So you can see when the audience is getting a little glazed over, all right, everybody up, here's what we're gonna do. Doing this workshop today, it was an hour and 15 minutes long, and I had 4 workshops to squeeze in. And when you do something, an activity to get them up and out of their seats, it takes time, and time was not on my side. So there was one thing we do for the where the parents have to rate their goals for their child in sports. And usually I have them, stand up, walk around the room, get with a partner you don't know, talk about what are your top 3. And I realized, like, if I had them do that, it's going to take a good 5 minutes, and I didn't have 5 minutes. So I just said, everybody up, and I'm going to read them one by one. And if you agree that that's one of your top 3 goals for your kid in sports, clap once. Each one. And it was engaging. It took very little time, but they got to clap a vote, and it wasn't just me reading through them. So sometimes, a lot of trainers have said, well, I was running out of time, so I just, said all the information. I just ended up lecturing because I ran out of time. And that's not going to get anywhere. That's not going to get the audience to remember anything. It's going to make you feel good because whew, I got through all the slides and I got through all the information, but it's going to do nothing for the learners in your audience. So having a couple different ideas is always helpful too, for pointing that out. Emily, what about you?
Hi, I'm Emily from Hawaii. I really like a lot of the activities you shared with us in last week's Hangout. I really like the one with the ball where, you throw it at a person and ask them the question, and that helps them to stay on their toes and just be ready to answer and really engage. So I like that handful of activities you gave us because I guess it's a little hard to think about, oh, what are all of these things that I can pull out of my bag? And so it's good to hear these examples from you so we can kind of maybe put them in our bag too and use them.
Absolutely. Anyone's you can. And we actually have a folder called the Interactive Activities folder, believe it or not, that's on the Google Drive that we share with all of our trainers. And anytime a trainer has a really cool activity, they sort of put a little blurb and description of it, and they put it in that folder. So there's actually more in there than you would ever use at a workshop. But just to let you know that there's a folder that contains that too. To do something simple like sticky notes. Like, there's so many simple things that trainers have done that, don't take a lot of time, don't take a lot of energy, but can mean a world of difference in a workshop versus having it be a lecture or a class. So as I said, tonight I'm going to explain a little bit. This is my favorite principle overall because number 1, it's the most important. And number 2, well, I think it's the most important. Number 2, it's the most fun you can have as a trainer at a workshop. Well, filling the emotional tank used to be our second principle. And if you read in the book, actually, let me grab my book. Okay, it is strange because it's out of order in the book because it used to be the second principle. We used to do Elm Tree of Mastery first, but we felt like in the revision of this new workshop, we were trying to think about the audience. And if we wanted the audience to come away with one thing, leaving the room, what would the one thing be? And this was actually a question that Jim Thompson posed to us. Once a year we get together for all the staff of PCA. And he posed this question: if there was just one thing that we wanted our audience to take away from here, what would it be? And unanimously it came out with, and again, very simple, we want coaches to be more positive, period. What is the one thing coaches can do to be more positive? Again, kind of rhetorical, simple answer is up their plus-minus ratio. We want their positivity to exceed their negativity. So that being such an overall theme, yes, Elm Tree of Mastery is important. Yes, honoring the game is important. But the idea and the culture change that we want coaches to have is becoming more positive because we've seen the effects, the beneficial effects all over the place. So that's when we decided to put this principle first, filling the emotional tank, because no matter how great of a coach you do with coaching for mastery and focusing on effort and making sure the players are playing with integrity and respecting the rules and the officials and all of those things, if a player is coming to you with an empty tank and you're not recognizing that, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's why we switched it. It's a little tricky in the book, and there is another edition coming out that is going to have filling the emotional tanks first. but with the thousands of books we still have in the warehouse, probably it's going to take a little while to burn through them. So at the workshops and just say why we felt like this is so important. And it's also the idea of PCA as a company trying to better ourselves all the time based on feedback. So we are welcome to say, you know, I say all the time, we've tried to make ourselves better. This is one of the ways we've done it. We've bumped this up to the first principle. So do you guys have any questions on that? Right. So I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to talk about this section of the workshop. You guys can be coaches, and I'm going to pretend to just facilitate this section. There's a lot of things where I say, like, stand up, sit down, move around the room, whatever it is, so you guys can just humor me and try to play along as much as you can. I have my trusty ball again. For this, sometimes, too, I'll bring a beach ball. I like to have a beach ball in my bag because it's flat, easy to travel with, and then you just blow it up when you get there. But my beach ball has been hijacked by my dog, and it's no longer blow-upable. So I'm back to this ball. I got to get myself a new beach ball. It's hard to do in Pennsylvania in September, but I'll see what I can do. All right, so we've already finished this. So the first introduction ends with kind of a wrap-up of these principles. So here are the principles we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about filling the emotional tank and honoring the game. And the first principle that we're going to talk about today is filling the emotional tank. And I'm going to illustrate this by a quote from one of my favorite all-time Americans, Maya Angelou. May I have a volunteer to read this quote for me? No need to raise your hand, just call it out for me. Can you see it?
I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Thank you. Now, that might seem warm and fuzzy and you know, everybody's just feeling good, but there's a lot of truth to that. Because someday as coaches, we've talked about the power of double goal coaching. You have power as a coach, and you have a lot more power than you realize. And as we talked about in the very beginning, the legacy that you leave as a coach is up to you. You're going to make an influence on these players, whether you intentionally make it a positive one or not. So let's talk about this. I want you to think on when you were a student, when you were younger. That doesn't have to be too young, but a team that you've been on that has just been one of your greatest experiences. All right, and I just want you to think about how it felt to be on that team. Okay, what was the culture like? What were the people like? What was the coach like? One of the greatest experiences that you've had being on a team. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to find 2 other people that do not coach the same sport that you do in the room. Now, obviously, if it's all soccer workshop, I might say 2 people that you do not know their middle name. You know, I'll usually say something silly like that. So they'll just have to find, even if it's their best friend, they're like, I didn't know your middle name is Albert. So conversation starter, find out their middle name, and then talk to them about the greatest experience they ever had being on a team. So can I just get one of you guys to volunteer to just share your story of a team that you were on and great experience of a team?
Sure. My first actual Little League team. We just had a really good coach, and we did win, but world or anything. We just won our little league in the park. But I was just thinking about this. This was a team where we never argued. Nobody tried to one-up anybody. Warm and fuzzy guy. He was both, you know. And it was just a great team. When I think about it, it couldn't have been the best way for me to start sports when I was 8 years old.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you, Dave, for sharing that. So what I do is I go around the room and I ask a couple people to share. And without a doubt, if it turns out this way, this is trainer to trainer, if it turns out perfectly, many, many times coaches will say the best team experience they ever had was as a very young youth. They would say, like Dave said, on a team 8 and under, my first soccer team when I was 7, my first basketball team when I was 8 or 9. And I always comment, and this happens without a doubt almost every time. Every once in a while you'll get somebody to say like my high school or college team. But it's neat to point out, why do you think we remember is at such a young age? And then you can kind of talk about that a little bit. Why would you say, Dave, do you think your best experience was your youngest experience in sports?
Because it was about the game. I mean, it was really about playing hard and playing it the right way. And nobody was worried about who was making the high school starting lineup, and nobody was worried about who was getting better recruiting looks than the other. The parents certainly weren't fanning any fires,
Mhm.
at that age.
Yeah, it was a low pressure situation. And the low pressure situations are feel good situations. We all feel good when we're not under that pressure cooker. So we at PCA, we recognize that everybody has a certain emotional level. And when you are at your emotional best, we call that you have a very high level of emotional maturity, full emotional tank. And we equate it to the gas tank of a car. So at times you'll have players that show up to your field and you know for a fact that kid's tank is full. I'm going to ask this side of the room over here. I want you to stand up and I want you to show me what players might look like coming to your field with a full emotional tank. Go. Just show me with your body language. Yeah, I see smiles. I see arms up. Woohoo, ready to go. All right, now you may have a seat. This side of the room, there are times when kids show up for practice or a game and you know before they say a word, their tank is empty. Maybe they had a rough day at school. Maybe their parents were screaming at them in the car. Maybe they couldn't find their mouth guard. Whatever it is, they're showing up and they're empty. This side of the room, I want you guys to stand up. Show me what an athlete would look like just with body language that has an empty emotional tank. Yeah, down, shoulders down, head down. Yep, absolutely. So just by body language alone, our first job as coaches is to recognize the emotional tank level of our athletes. Okay? What I want this side of the room to do is I want you to tell me of an athlete with a full tank, and I want this side of the room to tell me what is the potential of an athlete with an empty tank. What are they going to do today? And I want you guys to talk about what is an athlete with a full tank going to do today. And I want you to turn to somebody in front of or behind you right now and share that. So at the same time, everybody's buzzing around. All right, one of you guys, share with me what your partner talked about. What can a player with a full tank accomplish? What are they going to be doing? Go ahead, Adina, I'm just going to pick on you.
They can share their energy with others.
Great, awesome. Give me a couple more.
They can lead the team. They can work harder.
Nice, nice. So I pull it out. What else can they do? What else can they do? Then I would probably keep going with somebody else, but
yeah,
since there's only 3 of you, I'm not going to pick on you that much. This side of the room over here, tell me the limitations of an athlete with an empty tank. Emily, tell me what that player is going to be like that day.
Their energy will be very low.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Low tank. They'll kind of be dragging in drills, not having full focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this goes without saying, we talk about the idea of an empty tank. Kids are pessimistic. They're going to give up. But most importantly, they're less coachable. And we as coaches, it's our job to help guide them. And if they're not willing to listen to us and be coachable, then we might as well be speaking a foreign language to them, because many times we are. Athletes with a full tank, as Adina said, they're optimistic. Of course they are. But the key is this: they're able to deal with adversity. And sports is a lot about adversity. Not everything goes perfectly for every athlete. If they have a full tank, they can handle it. They can take criticism a little bit better and feedback a little bit better, and they're very coachable. So obviously, ideally, this is what we want. Simple. All I have to do is fill my athletes' emotional tanks, and we're going to be set. Here's my question. There's a lot of things we do as coaches we don't even realize drains a tank. The most obvious tank drainers are what? What would you say if I said, what are the most obvious ways that a coach can drain a tank? Just call it out.
Criticism.
Right, criticism, yelling, screaming. We know what that coach looks like. That's going to be the yeller, the screamer, the negative coach. Absolutely. We also know what can fill a tank. You showed it to me. The happy coach, who's all great. But you know what? It's funny. I'm just going to stop right here for a second. We used to have these pop up, so it was like one at a time. Fill and tank, fill and drain, fill and drain. So we switched it so that now they pop up all at once. So I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to rewind for a second. Because if these all pop up at the same time, I would just stick with the drainers. Okay, so Emily said criticism, yelling. How about sarcasm? That's something that's, if you live on the East Coast, that's kind of a secondary language that most of us have. Let's think about sarcasm. That is actually a tank drainer because kids don't get it. Who is sarcasm usually for?
The other coach.
The coach, to make us feel better, to help us get through this stinking practice. But remember, kids take it literally. So be very, very careful about sarcasm. You must have an excellent relationship with your players. And the rule that we like to say is your players should be in high school before you have a comfortable, sarcastic relationship with them, that you can joke around and you know that they can take it and they understand it. Nonverbals. As a coach, nonverbals are huge. We're going to talk about verbals and nonverbals in a second. All right, so let's talk about what fills the tank. All right, number one, truthful, specific praise. Wow. So we as positive coaches want to be as positive as possible. So we want to say, great job, woohoo, way to go, that's awesome. Great, but good job. Let's talk about that idea of good job. If I said, Emily, you did a good job today at practice. And Emily goes home and her mom says, Emily, how'd you do today at practice? And Emily says, I did a good job, Mom. And she says, really, what did you do well? What's Emily going to say?
I don't know.
I don't know. The coach said I did a good job. We want our kids to give the best effort, and we want them to do better than they did the day before. So we need to give them truthful and specific praise. We're going to work on that in a second as well. Expressing appreciation. Enough of. If we want our kids to work hard and give effort, we have to appreciate what they're doing, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether the play is executed the way we want it to. We're going to appreciate it. Next one, listening. Again, my grandmother said, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Are we listening as much as we're talking? Sometimes just listening to players, listening to what they're doing well, listening to what they're challenged with is huge. And again, nonverbals. So we're going to do an activity right now. Since there are 2 of you here, can you guys hear the flute in the background?
Just a little.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My daughter's practicing her flute, and I might ask her to go upstairs. Hey, Janie, would you be able to go upstairs, hon? Okay, thanks. Not that you guys don't want to be serenaded by 9-year-old flute playing. Sorry, it was a little
Sounds like my house.
Yeah. All right, so here's what I would do. I'm going to ask my 2 volunteers, Dave and Emily. Thank you. I would just pick 2 volunteers out of the audience. Dave, would you like to be the basket or would you like to be the shooter?
I'll be the basket.
All right, Dave's going to be the basket. Emily, you're going to be my shooter. Now, I have set this up with soccer. I've set this up with basketball. I've set this up with lacrosse. I've set this up with baseball. Instead of doing shooting, I'll do swinging the bat and striking out. But this is something I love to do. So I will bring both of you up. I'm going to give Emily the ball. And Emily, here's what we're going to do. We're going to practice filling and draining emotional tanks. So the first thing, Emily, you're going to do is you're going to take a shot. Dave is going to put his arms up like this. And you're going to take a shot and you are going to miss. And everybody in the audience, here's what you're going to do. On the count of 3, you are going to drain Emily's tank because she just missed a game-winning basket. Can you handle this, Emily, do you think?
I don't know.
Emily's going to shoot out. Are you ready, Emily? You're going to shoot, you're going to miss. Ready? Everybody else. Woo, woo. And the audience they love this. They really get into this. So she missed. All right. Next. Emily, you're going to take a next shot. This time, you're going to miss again. Your tank. Harder. So Emily goes up for the shot. She shoots. Dave makes sure she misses. I'm sorry. Dave makes sure she misses again. All right. Fill her tank, everybody. All right.
You got it. Next one. No problem.
Yeah. There you go. And I should say 10 times out of 10 when I do this with a group, the energy level is like half of what it was when they were draining the tanks. So I'll say, wow, that was a little tougher, wasn't it? When I tell everybody to drain the tanks when they miss, everybody goes, blah, blah, you suck, what were you thinking, blah, blah, blah. When I say, okay, fill her tank and she missed, there's like a hush for about a second. And then everyone goes, oh, good job, get it next time, good. It's difficult, and I always point out which one was harder to do. It's much harder to fill a tank. We're ingrained in our brain is that when we don't succeed, we drain. When we do succeed, we fill. How do we reverse that? Okay, how do we reverse it? Truthful, specific praise. All right, now I'll get a 3rd person to come up and pretend they're Emily's coach. So now we've got Emily the shooter, Dave the basket, and Adina, if she comes back, she would be the coach. Now, Emily, you missed again. Your team is trying to fill your tank as much as we can. The parents are trying to fill your tank. How are you still feeling inside?
Not too good.
Okay, you know that your team's got your back, but you're still not feeling great.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to put Adina on the spot right now because she just missed that little part. But if I were to pick your name, I just said Coach Adina. So Coach Adina would be there next to you, and I would say, okay, Coach, you just took Emily out of the game, or maybe the quarter was over. What would you say to your player that just missed the game-winning shot when they came out of the game, filling her tank, but giving her the feedback that she needs. Okay, what can you tell Emily that is truthful and specific and she did well, even though she missed the shot? All right, Adina, do you want to try that?
Well,
Emily
I'm not going to say nice try. I learned
Okay.
that already. No, but I'm gonna say, great hustle getting in position. You beat the defense. You took your shot. And yeah. So that's what I would say.
Perfect. That's perfect. What I've also done, instead of getting one coach like Coach Adina up in the front to work with Emily, because remember, there's only 3 people standing up in front of the room right now, which is very entertaining for the whole group. What I've also done is say, okay, now I want you to turn to a person next to you, and I purposely do it next to you. One of you is Emily that just missed the shot. One of you is the coach. Give that person who's playing the role of Emily, the shooter, advice. And just do the same thing Adina did. I'd have everybody do it with each other. And then practice it with your sport. That's always a fun thing to do too, because I'm using a basketball example. Give them the feedback that's tank filling, using truthful and specific praise, using nonverbals, expressing appreciation with your sport. And it's great to get a couple examples in the room from, if it is multi-sport, to hear, how do you do it in swimming? How do you do it in cross country? How do you do it in gymnastics? It's soccer, basketball, any shooting sports, that's pretty simple to do it with. But there's a lot of sports out there that don't involve a goal in shooting. So how would you do it in that sport? Explaining the principle. Now, here's the tool. We told you we're going to send you guys home with principles and then also tools. We want you to be able to have this in your toolkit so that when you go out to practice tomorrow, you've got it. What's the one thing coaches can do to be more effective? This is where it's simple. All we want you to do is this. We want you to be more positive than negative. That seems pretty simple. However, sometimes enough is enough, and too much can actually prove to be negative, because if a coach is constantly giving positives all the time with no critique in there, then there's not going to be anything the kids have to learn. So there is a balanced ratio, and this was borrowed from about 20 years of combined research. It was used in marriages, it was used in students, it was found in sports as well. And we've come up with this ratio based on all of those studies, collaborated. What is the perfect ratio? We call it the magic ratio, because when you hit this ratio of positives to critique in a relationship with a student, a mentor-student, coach-athlete relationship, the behavior and the performance of the athlete changes immediately. Multiple choice. 1 positive to criticism, 1-to-1. 3-to-1 positives to criticism, or 5-to-1. On the count of 3, I'm going to ask you to put up 1 finger, 3 fingers, or 5 fingers. Take a vote. Go. You guys are really good. You guys are really good. Yes, the correct answer is 5-to-1 ratio. 3-to-1, believe it or not, just if you're in a workshop and they don't know the answer. Look at page 32. We call this the magic ratio. You all have this book in front of you. Page 30 starts the athlete's emotional tank explanation. We can talk, page 32 is an example of this, okay? There's a little part in the book that explains how to do it. See, it's a tool that's in here. We're gonna go to a few more tools. So if we want coaches to up their plus-minus ratio, even coaches in the NBA have used this. May I get somebody in a great Phil Jackson voice to read this quote for me? Because this is just an awesome quote, and I definitely don't have a Phil Jackson voice. Dave, I think you have a Phil Jackson voice. Would you be able to read this quote for me?
I can't see it, actually, the way it's coming through on my phone right now.
And about that time, Jim's book shows up and positive coaching becomes an influence in my life. 5-to-1 ratio, 5 praises to 1 critique. And of course, the rest we know is that these goals won 3 championships in a row. One of the things when I do these workshops that we get critique on is these principles would be great for youth, but I am coaching a very competitive travel league. And I don't think 5-to-1 ratio is going to work with my athletes. Well, Phil Jackson felt the same way. When Jim Thompson approached Phil Jackson and say, hey, Phil, you know what? I'm trying to start this program. I'm trying to change a culture here. I found a lot of this research on 5-to-1 ratio. Do you think you could give it a shot with your NBA athletes? Phil said, I'll see. I don't know if it'll really work, but I'll give it a try for 2 weeks. I'll try to fill some tanks, be more positive. He used one of his players, Horace Grant. Many of you are familiar with him, who was a tough guy. He was like, he can handle it. Phil Jackson consciously was rough on Horace Grant to use him as an example for his players. And he actually asked permission from Horace and said, I'm gonna be a little tougher on you because you're a leader, and I think it's gonna get the other players motivated. So about this time, Phil Jackson reads about this 5-to-1 ratio, and he says, Horace is kind of in a slump. I don't know what's going on with him. Now, Phil Jackson admits it's striving for 5-1. You won't always get to 5. Phil Jackson said he got to about 3-1 with Horace, and he saw a change immediately in the skills and the performance and the work attitude of Horace Grant. So I was actually lucky enough to meet Phil Jackson last year, and I said to him, do you still preach the 5-1 ratio? And he said, I preach the 10-1 ratio. Because if I can get coaches to think and strive for 10, they might get 5. So I think it's pretty awesome that somebody at his level, a big proponent of this 5-1 ratio. So here's a little video from Phil, and he's going to explain this a little bit more. I don't know if you guys can hear
it. It's still extremely important to couch comments in a positive value, because we will give, you're working really hard, you're making plays that are really good, but something's not happening right out there. And whatever it is that's not happening right is always the thing that sticks in your mind. You can announce the 2 positive things or 3 positive things or 4 positive things before you announce the 1 negative thing, but somehow the negative thing is like an atomic bomb. So we really try and get them to focus on the fact that this is not about the negativity part of your game. This is about how you grow as a player.
All right, so let's put this in practice with your team. There's lots of ways we know how to fill tanks, okay? Let's see how we do this. Here's the issue. You know that athletes thrive on positive feedback because you understand this and it makes sense to you. But your team is struggling and they need a lot of correction. As a double goal coach, how can you give the feedback they need to improve without discouraging them? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the coaches in groups by age. So I'm gonna ask all the coaches, if whatever sport you coach, if you're coaching 8 and unders, I'm gonna put you, or U8, I'm gonna put you in this group right over here. If you're coaching U10, 12 over here, U15 over here. I like them to be in group by ages, and I'm gonna ask you, how do you handle this as a double goal coach when you have a team that, they need a lot of help in their skills? How do you keep the critique positive? And what are some specific examples you would use? So I'm gonna give you guys about 2 or 3 minutes to talk as your group, and we're gonna ask each group to share. So everybody goes. To do this just trainer to trainer. I love to do this by age group because it's very interesting to hear that the U8 coaches are all over this. We know it's about keeping the kids fun. We know it's about giving the kids positive feedback. We've got it. So they're usually the most energetic, and they're like, it's great, we have fun, we high five, it's okay, we give them the skills, and then we tell them it's okay if you make mistakes. Then you get around the room to the kids that are, the people that are coaching the older kids, and they're like, well, this is a little trickier at our age because, the kids have so many more skills to learn. Interesting to point out, what if you took advice from the kids coaching 8 and unders? Remember the team that I said in the very beginning that you had the best experience on, the 8 and unders. Why? Because the coach believed in you, you were having fun, you were getting skills, you were learning the game for the first time, but there wasn't all the pressure, and that's where you were performing at your best and you remembered. So let's take some of this advice, and it's just neat to point out the different age groups to the kids and how they handle this, when in reality, they should all be treating it the same way. We want all of them to be giving a 5-to-1 ratio of positives to critiques. And in the book, so let's keep going. All right, here are the tools. And I'd love you to open up with me to page 40, because as I told you, I'm sending you home with lots of tools here. Page 40 in your book begins actually it doesn't begin, but page 34 in the book begins the chapter on the tools. We've got 9 different tools that you can use to up the positive to negative or positive to criticism ratio on your team. We want the kids to be coachable. Feedback. The first one is avoid non-teachable moments. When is the worst time to give somebody some critical feedback? When would you say would be the absolute worst time he's been doing wrong?
Right after they make the mistake.
You got it. Guess when 90% of the coaches tell the players they've done something wrong?
Right after they make it.
You got it, because they've just subbed them out of the game, and here they come running over to coach, and they know they've made a mistake. And I have seen coach after coach say, you really shouldn't have shot that ball. That defender was right in front of you. I don't know what you were thinking. Now, that is probably the most tank draining thing possible, because it was not a teachable moment. The child was not able to receive the critique at all. Remember, as soon as the kid comes out okay? Blow his mind by telling him something wonderful that he did. The player knows that he came out of the game probably because he messed up something. Another good rule of thumb is if a player has made an error or a mistake on the field or the court, wait 2 plays to sub that player out. To go by, that player won't associate his mistake with this is why I'm being taken out of the game. Quick rule of thumb. It really helps to keep the tanks full. Next one, criticize in private. We always say criticize in private, praise in public in and of itself. Asking permission of the athlete. There's a lot of times when an athlete will come over and you can just tell by their body language their tank is drained. That is not the time to tell them a critique. All right, maybe saying, hey, Ashley, would you mind if I showed you another way to hold your hands to maybe get that shot to go off a little bit harder? And if she's like, coach, you know what, I just really need to get a drink of water. Signal, okay, that's not the time. Not because you don't have anything wonderful to tell Ashley, but because she's not gonna hear you. So that's another aha moment. If-then statements. Anybody ever have a 3-year-old? Anybody in this room has ever had a 3-year-old? What is the relentless question that a 3-year-old will ask you about 50,000 times a day? Everybody?
Why?
Why? So kids are no different at age 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They want to know why. If you're going to have the kids line up on the end line and do sprints at the end of practice and you say, okay, everybody up on the end line, we're going to do sprints. Universally, probably from your whole team.
No.
Right. What if you tell your team in the beginning of practice or in the middle of practice, all right, guys, we have a game tomorrow against a team that I know they're practicing hard today. So one of the things we're going to do at the end of practice, we're going to work on building up our leg muscles just when we're starting to feel tired. So at the end of practice today, if we can run those sprints and we can do it really, really hard the first or second time, then you will be ready tomorrow when you start to feel tired and you're going to know how to dig deep and push through for the end of that game. It's a simple explanation. If we do this, then this will be the positive result. You won't get the groans. And then at the end of practice, when you say, okay, everybody on the end line, we're going to have this against the team tomorrow. We talked about this. And they're like, okay. And they go and they do it. It's very simple. If you play wide, you will draw the defense out. If you keep your arms moving up that hill, your stride is going to be consistent. You're going to be able to get up there a lot higher. Instead of just telling the players what to do, phrase it in if-then statement, much better receivable feedback. And again, criticism sandwich is something very simple. We want to sandwich a critique in between 2 positives. Critique in between 2 positives. What's the ratio that you've just done?
2 to 1.
2 to 1, right. We want to get it to a 5 to 1. So we've got to add a little bit more. Emily was our shooter. Rather than just saying, Emily, you know what? I love the way you hustled back on defense. The angle of your shot was a little bit off. You might want to wait or move to the left or dodge the player before you take that shot. But you know what? You were right in there for the rebound. That's a 2 to 1. Emily, come on over. Smile. That's a 1. Emily, come on over. Used her name. That's a 2. While I was talking to her, that's connection. That's a 3. And then my 2 verbal positives and 1 critique, I've just done a 5 to 1 ratio right there. And listening and body language. So that's a good way to think about that. About some other tools. And this, again, I've done a lot of activities with you guys right here, trainer to trainer. I might not do every single one of these, but this activity right here is great for learners that don't want to be up and moving around the room. So I do this at every workshop. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to have you discover 3 tools. And I'd like you to open up the book to page 35. 35 has the first tool that we love to use called the buddy system. Ask you to get into groups of 3, and I'd like you to do it with people close to you so we don't have to move all around the room. Get together with 2 other people. One of you is going to choose the buddy system, and on page 35, you're just going to read that one little paragraph on the buddy system. The next partner is going to turn to page 39, and they're going to read about positive charting. And the third one is going to flip to page 41 and read about the winner's circle. So when I tell you to, I'm going to ask you to get with the 2 partners, and you're each going to read your section and just share with your partners just real quickly what that tool is and how you would use it with your team. All right, so again, this is great if they're around tables, if they're in a room, if they need to get up and move around, if they've been sitting for a little bit, then I might have them get up and move around the room and find 2 other people. I might say find 2 people that have the same hair color as you, or find 2 people that have the same eye color as you, or find 2 people that have the same number of children that you do, and I'll have people hold up their fingers. I had one guy that had 12 children one time, and he was like, ah. Okay, you need to be in your own
Yeah.
group, buddy. You need to be alone. But it's just a way to get them moving around. And this, again, using a different intelligence. They're reading, they're discovering on their own, and then they have to share it with their group. It's a great activity to do, and it's not so like hyper high all around the room. When you're finished, this does take time. This is a good 3 to 4 minute activity, sometimes even more. I usually don't go around the room and say, okay, share with me buddy system. What does that mean? Share with me positive charting. But what I will do to wrap up this activity when the 3 or 4 minutes is up and I say, okay, let's get back to our seats. Everybody moves back to their seats, or I'll say, okay, 10 seconds left, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and everybody gets quiet. Say, all right, after understanding those 3 principles, I would like you to clap vote or snap vote. How many of you think that you would love to implement the buddy system into your team? And then, everybody would clap. How many of you think positive charting would work for you and your team? Someone clap to vote. How many of you think winner's circle might be something you can use? So then everybody's kind of engaged, they're back, they're centered. And the last one is the positive charting. Now this is one personally for me. Positive charting changed the way I coach. So this is where I bring in my personal story. I always end this principle by talking about positive charting because when I first started coaching youth lacrosse, I realized there were so many skills that I was trying to teach these kids. And so now we're working on passing and throwing and catching and ground ball pickups and shooting and all of, and like baseball has the more skills than any sport. So you're trying to get all these skills together, and I was trying to focus on one a day. So positive charting, when I heard about this was huge because instead of giving the players, I want you all to be great players in every skill, we took one skill a day and we based it on effort. So for example, the first day of practice, we might just work on ground balls because everybody can pretty much scoop up a ground ball. You don't have to worry about catching or throwing. So that day, all I was doing was teaching the kids the fundamentals of how to pick up a ground ball. Ground ball pickups in lacrosse are basically all effort-based. So it was an effort goal, and I would have a chart, and it would say ground balls, and it had a list of all the players on my team. And every day, every time the kids did this at practice, and they really worked hard, I didn't care if the ball went in their stick or not. I would put a little tally mark next to it. So then when I would switch the drill around, I would have a physical accountability of the players and their names at who was working really hard for that ground ball, or who was in the right position, or who was doing it correctly. Again, it wasn't about who was picking up the ground balls. And I could mention, Adina, I saw you 4 times today run hard through that ground ball. That was great. Emily, I saw the butt of your stick down really low and you were running right through it. That was awesome. You did that 4 times. Huge tank filler. It's amazing when these girls realize that they're being watched for skills. So the next day, I might do passing or I might do something else. So positive charting is a way to keep the kids accountable. My issue was it was only me. I didn't have assistant coaches to help me. So in I got into a game and I was like, I would love to do positive charting for all these skills, but I don't have time. I'm worried about subbing in and getting off. How the heck do I do this? So I came up with an awesome idea, and I'm not giving myself all the credit. I did it out of need. Genius idea. So what I did was I brought index cards, and I should have them here for you guys. I have them in a pile. But I brought index cards to practice. And the day before the game, I had every kid fill out a skill that they wanted to work on for the game tomorrow. Sometimes I had everybody write down the same skill. Sometimes it was a different skill. What is the skill of the day that you want to work on for the game tomorrow? And it had to be based on effort. So they couldn't say shooting. They had to say following through on a shot. They couldn't just say catching the ball. They had to say loose grip when catching the ball or giving with it. And then I would collect them. The day of the game, I would hand each of them out to the players, and I'd have them run over and give them to their parents. And their parents were in charge of positive charting. So I explained to the parents at the parent meeting, this is something I need your help with. Every time you see your child do that skill based on their effort, I want you to put a little tally mark. Focused on what they should focus on. It kept them busy. It kept Mrs. Jones focused on the skill and the effort rather than screaming at her kid to shoot every time they got the ball. And I had positive charting done for me. It was fantastic. So that's something that I like to share just because it was a really cool way to do it, and I do it every game now. So that's it. We've talked about connection, filling emotional tanks. The next one we're going to go on to is the Elm Tree of Mastery. That's it. So we're going to do Elm Tree of Mastery next week. All right. I knew I went a little longer than I wanted to, but I wanted to make sure I got through all of that. And we lost Dave somewhere in there too. All right. Questions, thoughts, takeaways first before we jump into some ideas. Okay, there we go. All right, Adina or Emily, my big crowd here tonight.
Yeah.
What are some things filling the emotional tank? What did you like? What did you see? What have you seen done? What do you think would work for you?
You know, I think it's important how you hit home about this positive charting, because making it as easy as getting it into the parents' hands or getting other people, because again, we all have that intention of being that positive. And yet, like, we know if you're not keeping a tally of it, you know, I think we'd all be shocked if we looked at, if somebody else was judging us on every positive thing we said versus every criticism, and somebody was charting us. I think we'd be really shocked to see like what that ratio looks like. So, even though I think that we all have that great intention, it is important to document yourself so that you have something that you recognize you want to work on. And I think that when we get in the heat of the moment of coaching, it seems like a daunting task to chart instead of worry about where your defense is going to be on this play, and the reality is that it is so important. And it can be simple and it has that kind of impact, and there's kind of no excuse not to do it.
Yeah,
So.
That's a good point. The nice thing is too, it's a great carryover into Elm Tree of Mastery, because the next thing we're going to talk about is improvement. So I keep a chart for every game, and then the next game I can compare. And so instead of giving like an MVP award, I can give the most improved. Every single practice or every single game, I can give most improved, because I know how many times they, stayed wide, or they backed up their player, or any of these effort goals we're going to talk about in the next one too. I have record of it, so I can go back and look at it. Too, that I like to bring in, Adina, is that we do consultations. It's one of the things that we offer as partners. Not every trainer does it, but I've gone down and I've observed coaches and done kind of an evaluation of how the coach is doing in terms of positive coaching principles. So I get to watch and say, how many positive comments, how many negative comments? And it's sort of on a time basis, like at practice started at 4 o'clock, by 4:05, how many positives, how many negatives, how many positives, how many negatives. And it blows the coaches away. The beginning of practice, they're so positive. And these coaches know that they know it. I'm here. And their ratio in the beginning is like 10-1. Like, oh my gosh, these coaches are great. They know this PCA lady's here. They're going to do it. The last hour of practice, it totally reverses. It's like a 1-5. And they start to get tired. So I like to bring that up to coaches so they realize this is hard. It's not easy to do. But positive doesn't have to be smiling, awards, happiness, cheering. Positive is just listening to the players. Positive is using their names. Positives is a high five or a thumbs up. Those are all tank-filling behaviors.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, hi. Sorry.
Hi.
Ted.
Thanks
Hello.
for jumping.
This is Kristen joining.
Cool, that's awesome. No, I'm glad you did. It's nice to meet you.
My husband,
Okay.
I was just going to say, my husband's actually coaching youth flag football right now. And
Wow.
I, no doubt broke out the book with this charting thing like a month ago. And I was like, you need to read this right now.
It's so true. It changed the way I coached, like overnight, instantly. Absolutely. And the players are funny too, because the players, 9-year-olds, are like, because the one day I forgot my index cards, and they were like, Coach, where are the cards? Where are the cards? And I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot them. Like, we have to do the cards. I'm like, okay. And they actually were like writing skills on their hand. Like, I'll do it. We won't forget. And they were like, Mom, keep and the kids were like, can you make an app for this? Because this would be awesome for my mom to be able to check this positive charting on an app. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like these kids are so, their parents pointing out what they've done well. So that was really cool. Emily, how about you? Any takeaways or feedback?
I really like, of course, the exercise, because that gets the audience engaged. When I was throwing the basketball and Dave was the hoop, that's an easy one to explain tank filler and tank drainers. And I think pointing out how difficult it is to give positive feedback after the shot wasn't made, that's a really good thing to point out.
Yeah.
I also like when you're going down the toolkit, the ways how we can give receivable feedback, how you explain each one, because I think just kind of course, you know, if we were as a trainer to just list, okay, give them ask them if they're ready for the feedback, or giving this what is that, the sandwich, yeah, or the if then those are, it's so good for it to be explained. And when you use the examples, it helps us to understand it clearly. So I really like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other option that I've seen trainers do, I'm trying to make sure I have it on the right page, but one of the neat things to do too, if you look at, I don't know if you have your books in front of you, but on page 32, it talks about, page 31 and 32, talk about the truth, talk about the beginning. This is something else that's kind of a neat activity about what fills the tank and what drains the tank. And on page 31 and 32, it actually has quotes that coaches say to fill tanks and drain tanks. So I might have somebody, I'm gonna open up to page 31. All right, tank fillers, truthful and specific praise. Can I have 2 volunteers to read for me in that great coach voice an example of how you would give truthful, specific praise? And then you have somebody in like some loud, funny voice go, nice effort, you hustled and fought all 4 quarters. And then somebody else will say, I love the way you kept your eye on the ball and followed through. You know, so it's kind of fun that way. And then I would say, okay, flip over to page 32. And what I've done, I've already done this where like this side of the room are the tank fillers and this side of the room are the tank drainers. So I would still pick somebody from that side of the room to read the tank filling comment quotes. And then I would switch over to this side of the room and go, okay, can I have a volunteer on page 32 on that side of the room? Now tell me what a criticism and correction tank drainer sounds like. And they would read, you should have gotten more loose balls. Be aggressive like Maria. That swing was weak. Come on, get with it. And I've pointed out too that when I'm doing these observations, even of parents, probably the most used word I hear from coaches and fans is come on. That's it. Come on, come on, come on. You know, again, not truthful, not specific, tank draining. So, you know, that's just another neat way to get them in the book. And to put the verbiage with the principle, like you were talking about explaining each one, it's really amazing. And it's funny because I get down to the nonverbal on page 32 and I'll say, okay, can I have an example? Frowning, eye rolling, heavy sighing. And they're like, and like, you can make fun of it. Like, wow, you were really good at that. You know, something like that, just to keep them funny. The sarcasm stuff, you know, I love talking about sarcasm. My grandmother, you know, like things, comments that we say that we think are funny and they're just not, and it's hurtful. So that's another example too.
You know, when I watched the YouTube videos today, and the thing I noticed was that they were so different in their delivery, and that we can all have confidence that like who we are will connect, you know, because the first guy, Simon, was so thoughtful and spent so much time engaging the crowd. And then Wiggins like had the personality, like he could have talked for 5 hours, like that was fine. But the thing that I loved to hear about him was that he didn't, his example of the tank was completely not related to sports. And It was driving on I-95. And when he runs out of gas, and it's like, all of a sudden my heart started to pound because I've been on I-95 without gas, you know? Yeah. But I think that that's important, is that not all of our stories have to be specific to those sports to get people to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think it's even better sometimes when it's not, to illustrate this principle. And we actually have a 19-year-old trainer down in Tampa, and she, you know, we weren't sure how she'd be as a trainer, but she did this excellently because she was bringing up whatever the highway is in Florida that goes to the Everglades, and she has to go through it. And she was in like her brother's car, and she was driving, and she's in the Everglades, and you don't get out of your car in the Everglades because there's alligators, and the light went on. Gosh, when your empty tank light goes on, what are you thinking? And everyone's like, ugh. Like, I'm in the Everglades, I cannot get out. My warning light is on because I have no gas, and that light is on and on and on. And she said, coaches is on in your players.
Yeah.
And I was like, just the way she explained it, And then she circled back and she explained a lot of it. And then she was like, find what makes their light go off. What can fill it up to make that warning, make that light go off? Because there are behaviors your players will do to make the, and then it was like talking about not just body language of draining and filling. Older athletes are harder to tell when their tank is empty. Do older athletes exhibit when their tank is empty? And then it's like aggression or, back talking or not being compliant to the drill or bad mouthing somebody or arguing, and it's just really neat to hear the different behaviors. I mean, we could do a whole workshop on this principle alone, which we actually do called Positive Motivation. It's a deep dive into the E-Tank, but it's just really neat to hear different experiences. We've got about 1 more minute, and I want to give you a chance if you guys have any last minute thoughts on this or stories or anything like that you think would be helpful.
Well, this is not really specific to the emotional tank, but it was just kind of an aha moment as I'm getting so excited about becoming a trainer. So our league our hockey league, my son's hockey league, had contracted PCA to come out and do a parents workshop prior to me even getting involved in this. So I've been very proactive and I've sent out, an email to all the parents that I could get a hold of saying how important this is and all this. So then one of my very dear friends, I asked her, I said, oh, are you, and they need to come to the session. I said, oh, are you coming? And she's like, no, Adina, I'm not coming. And I was like, oh, all right, well, what's going on? And she's like, well, I'm coaching my Stella Kate soccer game, and it was very condescending. And then I said, oh, well, can Mike go? Like the husband. And she's like, no, he'll be watching his daughter play soccer that night, And again, this is one of the dads that like almost got in a fist fight outside of the locker room. Yeah. And I just realized that I just had that moment where like, we were so excited and we know it, but like just treading lightly and waiting for openings. Yeah. And not forcing it.
Yeah.
So.
It is. And I told you before, my husband calls it PCA vomit. Like I have had to control this over the years when I'm talking to people, like I can't PCA vomit all over people. You really do have to tread lightly. Interesting thing though, a lot of the partner managers are learning to be a little bit more forceful with the parent workshops about making them mandatory. Yep. Sure that your organization embraces. If you tell parents that it is mandatory that they pay for their child to be on the team, it's mandatory for uniform pickup night, and there's a meeting that is mandatory, a mandatory parent meeting. If you say there's a mandatory parent meeting or your child will not be able to play this season, and we're offering you 2 different times to come to this mandatory parent meeting, they're not gonna miss it. Because they would never sacrifice the opportunity for their child to play. But if you say, we're offering a parent workshop to help all of you parents be better. Yeah. They're going to be like, look at that.
Exactly.
So the word mandatory scares people, but the word mandatory works. And I've done a lot of parent workshops that are mandatory. And I get a lot of parents like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Blah, blah, blah. But then they perk up. Oh, well, this was actually pretty good. And I've delivered the mandatory parent workshop at my own organization that I coach lacrosse for. Come to the parent meeting. They don't even mention that PCA is going to be there. Come to the parent meeting. And the board, they introduce themselves. They talk about scheduling, field time, uniform pickup, blah, 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 blah. And then for the last half hour, Kelly's here and she's going to talk to us about PCA and talk to us a little bit about how we can be better parents. Like from anybody.
Yeah.
Just the way, and I tell them, don't tell them I'm going to be there. Like, just make it mandatory that they come. And they all come, and then they say, oh, well, can you talk to my son's soccer team, and can you talk to my football team, and we want you to come out to this. So it's been, I don't do it as a marketing opportunity because I just do it because it's my team, but it's something that parents aren't afraid to do mandatory when it involves their children risk of playing. Yeah. So, all right. I have now gone over by 2 minutes, which I like to do. So thank you. I like having a small little group on here. It's actually fun sometimes because I actually get to talk to you guys. So I appreciate it, all that you're doing. And I'm trying to reply. I usually try to reply to at least one of your discussion questions throughout the week. I like to have lofty goals and I'll reply to every single person. And then sometimes I look, I'm like, oh my gosh, 30 people posted a question on Sunday. So But I read them all, and I actually absolutely love what I'm learning from everybody. So if you go on that wall, the web site for the group, you can see everybody's responses too. And they're not just emailed to you. So on whatever you need to do. But thanks. If you guys have any questions, I'll hang out for a couple minutes. But if not, good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep.